What's up, folks? Justin Garcia here, aka Master Chim, and welcome to another episode of The Pressure Project. ThePressureProject.com is our website. Info at ThePressureProject.com is our contact email. You can check out our membership site at ThePressureProjectMembers.com. A lot of content there, a lot of stuff in the archives for you. And we also obviously just released the LoyaltyMatrix.com, which you should check out as well. So all that being said, all the plugs being done, we have a special treat for you guys today. Today we are lucky enough to have had for an interview American wrestling legend, Cary Kolat. This interview's been a while in the making. Cary and I, it winds up, we share a bunch of mutual friends, and I was able to drag him away from his super busy schedule for a phone talk. The talk's about an hour. And when I tell you he covers everything with me, we cover everything. There's even one point in the interview where I recall telling him, "Oh, well, I didn't want to bring that up," and he was like, "No, let's talk about it." So great dude, a lot of great content. And if you know wrestling, you know who Cary is. And after this, whether you know him or not, you'll respect the man for his wisdom, his experience, and the power that he shared with us during this incredible interview. I'll see you on the other side. What's up, folks? Justin Garcia, a.k.a. Master Chim here. And on the line, got a special treat for you guys today, Mr. Cary Kolat. Cary, you want to say hi to the listeners?
Hey, how you guys doing? I appreciate you letting me come on, Justin, and give me a call, and I'm glad to help out.
Oh, I'm glad that you could give us the time. At this point, I've already done the intro, so everybody knows how awesome a wrestler you are. So I'm not going to go through the list.
All right.
But suffice it to say, as an amateur wrestler myself, I hold you in very high regard, and I'm glad to have you on the phone.
Thank you.
No problem. So we got a bunch of things I wanted to go over with you today. I wanted your take on. I know you have a very unique perspective in that you feel a certain way about the way things should be done, but you've also have a body of work that supports that. Your perspective comes from experience, not just theory. But you're born and raised in Pennsylvania, wrestled up through Pennsylvania wrestling. Everybody knows Pennsylvania wrestling is the best wrestling. All I got to do is ask Tom Kyer, and that's all he wants to tell me. But what was it like growing up in Pennsylvania in a wrestling town?
I didn't know I was in a wrestling town. You don't even realize it when you're young and you start out. My parents, they kind of moved around a little bit with my dad's job in the beginning, and then we settled back in Pennsylvania, where they were from at 5. They had 3 kids, and it just got to be a lot traveling around. And I had a couple cousins that wrestled, and so I just started wrestling. My parents just put me in it. I had a lot of energy, and they put me in it. And I didn't realize what I was getting into. I didn't realize what a big deal wrestling was in the state of Pennsylvania, and it wasn't until, I don't know, I guess I would say, when I was about 10 years old, I realized this is a pretty big deal. To put it, I guess the best way to sum it up is like our elementary school states. You can enter when you're 8 years old, and they go up to 13, 14. You can't be in high school, but it starts at they'll put 10 to 15,000 people for the finals, and
right.
So you've got a 8 to 10-year-old wrestling in the finals of a championship where there's 8 to 10,000 people watching, and so it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I can't even. I'm here in the Bronx. I can't even get dads to show up for a little league game.
Right.
So so that's good to hear. So now, as you've wrestled through Pennsylvania, you were, people. I honestly don't even know if I'm qualified to say it, but I'm not going to disagree with anybody that says you're the greatest high school wrestler of all time. But I know that I've read a lot of your stuff. It's one of these things. I've been a fan of your work for a couple of years now. I coach professional fighters, and I send them all to your website, and so many of the things that I teach, I'll find myself referencing you and the stuff that you go over to make sure I'm not fucking it up. But what's it like with the world of wrestling as you see it? Because I've read a blog article that you've written about when kids should start wrestling, when you think they should start wrestling, and you think that or at least you've written about a position that there's a starting too early, and it's one of the things that hit home with me. I have 3 sons of my own, and
I'm a black belt performer fighter, and anything that I've accomplished, a lot of my students are waiting for me to talk about how awesome my kids are going to be. And you know what? It's like I'm teaching them mindset, I'm teaching them the basics, I'm getting them involved, getting them into it, but the pressure really hasn't started. My oldest is being 9.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I truly believe that you cannot be successful at anything unless you want to be successful at it, unless you're the driving force. So, when I've got 3 kids myself, and people ask me about my son who's 8, and they always ask if he's going to wrestle, and I could get him going. I could get him going. I could give him some skill work to go out there and beat some kids who are around his age, and maybe start jumping up and beating some other kids outside of his age group. But in the end, when you get to the end, when the kid's old enough to really start thinking about school and girls and parties and all that stuff, then he's going to decide whether he wants to do it or not do it. And
Right.
and that's kind of how I look at it. For me, I was really rare. I was one of the guys who started at 5 and stuck with it. And when I tell people, listen, I loved it. I lived it. I mean, I liked going into an arena where it was me versus somebody else, and I got an adrenaline rush off of it, and I loved it. And I was traveling with 30 to 40 kids, the same age as me, and we were all good. We were all ass kickers traveling the country to these little league tournaments, and in the end, when it's all said and done, it shakes out. There's one guy left, and it was me. I went to college and I did all that stuff and had success there, and internationally I had success, and I had passion for it, and I mean, I was OCD about it. And so starting a kid young in no way, shape, or form guarantees success. Not at all,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned. And you have to look at, everybody should have an end game of what they're looking at. And, my end game was international wrestling, trying to win an Olympic gold medal. And I know you can see it. There's some parents, their end game is to get their kid a scholarship. Well, they won't hang on to it. They'll get to college and get their face, smushed in the mat, and because they won't have the drive to continue to do it. So the kid's got to want to do it, and you got to make sure that you don't drive it out of them by going too, hard, or putting too much pressure on them early. You got to let them see if it develops for them. And I was just kind of rare against the rule, I guess.
Right, right, and I agree. It's been my experience, absolutely. Well, let me ask you, what were your parents? Because I've coached everything from football to little league to obviously jiu-jitsu and MMA, and we have our version of little league parents and
Yep.
jiu-jitsu. What was your relationship with your parents and your competition like?
My dad was, I got to go back in time. My dad is old school, and like my wife's parents and my parents are probably different. My dad I always say, he kind of ruled the house with an iron fist. He grew up in Western Pennsylvania. His parents were pretty much fresh off the boat, immigrants, and they had a way of running a family and doing things, and my father had his way. But, I mean, this was my dad's absolute rule, and I know a lot of people have said it, but the question is, do they follow it? He didn't really care about winning or losing. He never did. And he was hard on me, and people would always think that it's because he was caught up in the winning. What he was caught up in was I could never quit.
Right.
That was the one thing that he would never let happen. I couldn't be 9 years old and things got tough, and I lost the match because I quit, not because the kid was better. I could lose
Right.
to a kid who was better than me and have no problems, but if I went out on the mat and I quit, that would be a problem, and then, at 10 years old, if we went to the job site, and he would have me out on the job with him in the summer if I wasn't wrestling, and, I wasn't allowed to sit down and not be working,
Right.
so that was what it was. Skill and development of technique, that was easy, but, the mindset in our house was you could never quit at anything you started. If you quit, there was hell to pay for it.
Yeah, it's a common theme, especially with the stuff that I talk about here on the Pressure Project, of mindset and mindset being so
Mhm.
important. It's and that little subtlety, that difference between the distinction between it's not a matter of winning or losing. It's really you better not quit.
Right.
It's so valuable. It's one of those universals that I see in so many people that are successful. And what's your experience? You've grown up obviously at a high level of wrestling early on. How many guys did you see sort of fall by the wayside early as opposed to when you started reaching, the higher levels, the national level high school and eventually college, the guys who probably came on later in those years? Is your experience that most of the guys that you're wrestling with in college or by college have been wrestling since 5 like you, or was it your experience that, it really didn't matter? Some of them, maybe just started coming on in high school.
This one's it's kind of hard for me to answer. I wish I had exact stats, so I just can go with what I know. And this is I wrestled a kid when I was 15, and he had been wrestling since he was like 7 or 8 years old, and I had been wrestling since I was 5, and we met at a national championship when I was 15, and then I met that same kid again for the 2000 Olympic trials.
Right.
I mean, so here's what I say. The 5 and 8-year-old who starts and really loves it is probably got to jump on that kid, but the chance of you being one of those kids is slim to none. I mean,
Right.
It's such a very small percentage of the hundreds of thousands of kids who start out wrestling, and then if you could, exponentially compound that number by how many kids started and then quit, it's just a very small mark. And I did have a head start to some extent. And most of the guys on the world teams and Olympic teams that I competed with had started at an early age. But the majority of those guys that started at that early age were gone as well. Now, the college guys and the guys in high school who had success, typically they were starting at like 10, 11, 12 years old. And so they didn't have that burnout factor. And but there, at the same time, there weren't so many of those guys that were making the world and Olympic team. So I guess it just depends on what you're shooting for. If you're shooting to be a collegiate national champion, then you probably have a better shot of starting at like 11, 12 years old.
Right.
If you're talking about, hey, I want to become, one of the best guys in the world, then you probably start about 7 or 8. But then, if my son comes in today and says, Dad, I want to be an Olympic champion, well, I'm going to sit back on the ride and say, let's see if he makes it. Let's
Right.
see if he can, when he's 14, if he still has the same drive to continue to do it.
Right. And piggybacking on that, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I got a son, he's 2. Cary, when should I start him wrestling?
I always tell him 10. That's what I tell him. Body control first. Like, it's amazing to me. Like, I would have, when I ran club, I'd have parents drop off their kid who was 5, 6, 7 years old, because maybe they read an article about me as well. And so, well, let's get him going. But I could tumble, I could roll, I could do flips. I taught myself that stuff. And the kid will come to my practice room and he can't even do a proper forward roll. And mom and dad want to see if he can control somebody else's body when he can't control his own.
Right.
And I'm like, so go do. I'm the biggest believer in it. The best wrestlers in the world have come out of the former Soviet Union and now Russia and all those former satellites, and they do gymnastics for like 4 to 5 years. And my daughter's in gymnastics, and all my kids have done some extent of it. And this one coach my daughter had said, it was the best way to explain it was gymnastics is the mother of all sports. Learn how to control your own body first before you start trying to develop and learn how to control somebody else's. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through that path, but that's what I tell them. Do 4 or 5 years of gymnastics, and then come back and then see, what the difference in strength and explosion and power and teaching and understanding coaching is just a tremendous advantage.
Right. That's a great point. I, with my kids here, one of the things I've always focused on is getting them used to the physicality of what will eventually be, fighting and jiu-jitsu and stuff. So, roughing them up, roughhousing, and getting them used to playing rough, but also, getting used to all those things where, you don't want a kid who doesn't have fun developing attributes. So I try to have them have as much fun with it as possible. But getting back to now, like the Little League and the bringing a kid up in wrestling, there are going to be good habits. We all know there's ways to overpressure a kid that isn't ready for it, to burn him out early on. But along with that, hey, let's do gymnastics. Let's get them wrestling at 10. From that point on, what are some of the good habits that you can let a parent know to sort of try and put their kid in the right direction where wrestling's concerned? It's
not like any other sport, I did other sports. I played on a baseball team. I played football. There's nothing like, one-on-one combative sports. Yeah, and so the discipline that it takes, to have success in it is tremendous compared to other sports as far as I'm concerned. And the discipline it takes to control your emotions when you lose. And that's one of the things. Like, my dad would always give me a hard time. Like, I wasn't allowed to cry when I was a kid, and it takes a lot, because losing at the hands of somebody else, like, it brings on embarrassment. It brings out, I used to look at a guy and say, basically, you're telling me I'm a liar if you beat me. You've outworked me, and I've been lying to myself and lying to all my training partners. And so you have to live with it. But in the end, if you're able to live with those setbacks, I mean, you just become a stronger man or a stronger, woman, whatever it is you're doing. You become tremendously stronger than other people. And I tell my guys when I coach on the team, I said, don't ever consider yourself part of the herd. I'm like, you're different than everybody else that walks around on our college campus, and do the things that we do.
Right. No, a great point. Now, you like so many people who've seen individual success, you've also moved into coaching, and obviously there's going to be a lot of difference between, being on the mat and sort of having to inspire somebody else to do well on the mat. What have been your biggest challenges as a coach that maybe you were able to just power through as an individual, but you don't have the ability to now that you're sitting on the side of the mat?
Yeah, the culture is the big thing you'll hear guys talk about like crazy. First of all, recruiting is the key to success. It's finding those guys that you feel like, okay, I've recruited a good guy who doesn't like to, won't accept losing, won't accept quitting, and he's going to continue to have that same drive through college. That's the first step. And then the next step is, our sport is, again, different, where you don't get to, play in a football stadium with 80,000 fans, and even if you don't play, you get to wear the uniform, and people are cheering. It's kind of cool, and wrestling, you might walk onto a team, and, there's a stud in there, and you might look at it and realize, man, it might be 3 years before I ever start,
Right.
and I'm required to be here at 7 a.m. and get my face put in the mat, and I'm required to let this guy beat on me, and at the same time, I got to go to school and balance academics, and I can't quit. And so creating a culture where there's the winning and the success and the culture of the team is so connected that even if a guy is not going to start for 2 to 3 years, he's going to stick it out. So the day that the opening happens for him, that when we put him in the lineup, he can get out there and kick ass.
Right.
And so that's the hardest part, is keeping a guy motivated. When you're not putting on the singlet, it's not fun.
Right. So you've coached for a while now, and I'm sure there are things that, looking back, you would have done differently had you known it now. What are some of the mistakes you might have made early on that you now know were mistakes?
I would say the first one is realizing not everybody was like me. In the end, look, I mean, and it's just like, I think it was that what's the movie? It's a Beautiful Mind, where the physicist wins the Nobel Prize. There's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser. Plain and simple. Right. And in the wrestling room, you're going to have the starter, you're going to have the guy in the middle who's fighting to get up there, and then you're going to have that guy who likes to be part of the team and likes the gear, and he's a good partner. And you need partners. You need people you can drill with. So, I was always trying to find the stud and not always seeing the value that different people brought to the room. And so that made me a better coach. And then I started being a little less hard. I felt like if I was allowing a guy to get his face put in the mat and not putting a foot in his ass, I wasn't doing my job. And then I realized, some of this stuff I got to let guys figure out on their own.
Right.
I got to show them. I got to try to teach them. But then at some point he's got to decide, look, you're not sticking my face in the mat anymore. And
Right.
I can't carry it home with me every night trying to save everybody. And that's the other thing. You can't save everybody. You kind of have that. You got to come up with your own set of rules, whether it's 3 strikes and you're out. But I always tell a guy, if I show you to fix something, 3 to 4 times, and then I come back a month later and you're still in the same position, that just tells me you're not trying and you don't care. And then I got to move on and go help a guy who is not wasting my time.
Right. Great point. And since you've been coaching, what success I should not say what success have you seen, but what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? It's easy, when you're the guy wrestling. I want to be an international champ. I want to go for an Olympic medal, whatever the case. I want to be a national champ. As a coach, what are you trying to accomplish?
First of all, I mean, for my program, it's been a program that hasn't had any kind of, traditional success or history behind it. So our first goal is to win conference. Plain and simple. And it may not seem like a lofty goal, to guys like myself out there who might be coaching at Penn State or Ohio State, but that's my program right now. So winning conference is the first step. And once we win conference and start building a winning culture and we're winning more than we're losing, then we can go that next step and start becoming, a team that's traditionally ranked in the top 10, before we make our big push. So that's our first step in that direction. And the other one is we had a rocky season this year based on the win-loss column. And if you judge us on that, you might say, well, this team is struggling. But, I look at it and say, okay, I got X amount of freshmen on this team, and did we quit? And we didn't really quit. I mean, we had our matches where we had a guy where, he shut down on us. But for the most part, they didn't quit, and you can fix that. When a team's not quitting in the wrestling, you can fix them. But if they're giving up, you can't fix that. It's tough to fix quit. That's what I tell people. And so we weren't that kind of team. We battled. We just aren't as good as what we need to be over the next couple of years right now.
Right, that's a great point. And so much of what we talk about here is the value of tribe, the value of family, of culture, and how it's really not something that happens overnight. And there's certain formulas you got to pay attention to, and the mindset is a big thing. And I see that it's more of a universal.
Yeah.
And it's obviously one of the things I've always looked to wrestling for are the parallels. The parallels to regular life, the parallels to struggles that people have normally. And how I don't think it's really a mystery why kids who've grown up wrestling, are just a different breed of person. Work ethic and resilience, and just being able to deal with adversity on the norm. With you've gone to the point where you have had personal success. You obviously are now in a position where you are going to have success as a coach. Outside of those two stories, what else are you interested in? What else are you trying to accomplish as an individual?
I mean, as a parent, I think you can't sit back. I feel like there was probably a time period in my life after wrestling and being a new father, and then I was trying to determine whether I wanted to coach wrestling or whether I was going to do something in the business world, and so I was kind of all over the place. So I never had a direction, or I never had a path that I was following. And when I was wrestling, I developed my path at 8 years old. They said I'm going to the Olympic Games. And so everything I did was a sub-goal to get there. But after that, I was kind of like I was all over the place and scattered. And, so now I feel, I'm in a place where, okay, what are the goals? Well, number one is to be a good husband and a good father, and I feel like there was years I wasn't doing that. And everybody's allowed to have setbacks, it happens. And, you got to snap yourself out of it and get back in that groove. And to succeed at doing that stuff, you got to hang out with the right people. When I competed, my roommate was Senshiro Abe. He was a 4-time All-American, national champion at Penn State, academic All-American, Olympic team member, world team member. That's who I lived with. And I moved in with him because I knew keeping up with him would not be easy. And if I could do 80 to 90% of what he was doing, that would put me on the right path. And it's important, man. It's important who you surround yourself with. I've known Tom for a long time, and Tom, and I got to meet the other day, and he's an individual that has a high capacity for what he does, and he surrounds himself with the right people, and that's how you get there. And, you have to keep those people around you. And unless you're really strong-minded, I got a freshman, and, he comes in my office, and he's struggling academically, and he's struggling in the room, and I ask him who his friends are, and I look, and those are the same guys that are struggling. I'm like, well, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Go to the guy who's getting it done academically. Go to the guy who's getting it done in the practice room and on the mat. And then, get to 80% of what he's doing, and you're going to be okay. And then pretty soon you're that guy. And so that's where you have to be.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like it's great hearing this from you because it validates all of my positions. We have the saying here that tribe matters. And, so many people, they want to do things by themselves. They only see themselves as being the only way to get to where they want to go. And obviously people that have accomplished anything know that it's not just about them. It's about the synergy of the group and about, what they, what kind of pressure they could also surround themselves with to really make them push ahead.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. If I look back and people ask me, what's your biggest strength, Cary? I'd be like, I was self-driven and self-motivated and independent. And it was a huge strength for me, but at the same time, I sometimes that was probably my biggest downfall as well, because I'll try to run off and do things on my own and say I'm tough enough to get it done, and
right.
A different set of eyes and a different perspective is huge. Like now when I do stuff, when I'm done and I've been on something for hours, I go to my wife and say, hey, just look at this for me. I just need somebody else to look at it because I can't see it anymore. It's been in front of me forever. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the great things about, what you've been doing, for me, like a guy who isn't connected to you, personally with wrestling, is your website. Now, your website, I don't know if you had the foresight to look ahead at what, was going to happen with the world of the internet, but your site's been really good for a really long time.
Yeah.
How did you wind up developing that?
You know what? I'll tell you what it was. I was running club. It was probably, I'd say, in a time period where I was like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I was just kind of like, I didn't have any goals or plans laid out like I did for wrestling. So anyway, I would always get behind. I made some DVDs, and I always get behind on shipping them out. People would pay online, and it'd be 2 months later, and they'd be emailing me saying, hey, you took my money, but you haven't shipped out the DVD. I was a little disorganized, and I was backed up, and I was like, I could just put this stuff on YouTube. And then that led into, the website. And it's not the first site of its kind. For wrestling, I thought it was the first one. And then when I did some research, I found out, there were a couple other people that tried it, but they just didn't market it correctly.
Right.
And, and then I got hooked up with a buddy of mine named John, who Tom knows as well. We've known each other for a long time. And he did, film and some movies and runway shows, and he's good with the camera. And so I told him the idea, and then we just jumped on it and started running with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things, and I wrestled in high school, but I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time. The world of jiu-jitsu for so long is like, everybody thinks they've got the secret sauce. Everybody thinks they've got the magic move,
right.
And nobody wants to show anybody anything. But one of the great things about your website, from the beginning, it's like, yeah, here he's showing everything that he does, his favorite moves, like what he chose his guys.
Right.
And, it's and I guess it may very well be a wrestling thing, but it was certainly my first exposure to it at that level, was seeing you just show everything.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, here's what I do. I'm doing it perfectly, and here's everything that I like to do when I teach it.
Right.
Which is great.
And I don't know so much about the jiu-jitsu culture, and it may be like that. I know horse racing is like that. I had a friend who wrestled and did horse racing, and we talked about it, and they don't share anything. They all think they have their own secret to make that horse run fast, but in wrestling, we kind of used to say, look, you can watch video and scout your opponent as much as you want, but in the end, if you can't stop it, you can't stop it.
Right.
So we didn't really care, and it forces you to get better, and make adjustments.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So now, after you wrestled, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it was after you wrestled for college, but before you made your comeback, which we'll talk about eventually. You dabbled in some MMA, some I want to try this fighting thing out. What kind of adventure was that like for you?
I'll tell you, I was working for a company in business. It was Papermate and Sharpie, and we were doing some sponsorships in under-sponsored sports. And MMA was, some of these smaller shows, and it was our Greco catch right now. Oh, Matt Lindland, sorry. So Matt and I had been on a couple teams together, and I was out there looking to sponsor his club, and then they had a guy pull out. And so he asked me if I would jump in and do it. So I probably had about 2 weeks of training with a heavy bag in my basement and stuff. And I fell into the jiu-jitsu trap. People always ask me what happened because my style in wrestling was go, go, go. And, I was taking the guy down easy, taking him down easy. I was punching him easy. And then when I look back, it was 5 minutes of him sucking me in. And pretty soon I couldn't pick my arms up anymore and I had exhausted myself. So I fell right into the trap of the jiu-jitsu game.
Yeah, but it's funny that it's just the mindset. Like, yep, I'll try it.
Yeah.
I'm there to try and sponsor your team. Oh yeah, I'll fight in 2 weeks, sure.
Yeah.
Wrestling mindset. It's great. I learned early on. My first jiu-jitsu class I took I was like 25, 26, and I had wrestled in high school. I had I grew up fighting in the Bronx,
right.
but It was one of those things where I had a guy I was probably 200 pounds, just getting out of bodybuilding and powerlifting, and had a guy about 150 pounds just, wipe the floor with me, almost breaking my body down the first class I took. So there's definitely something to that shit. But the mindset, again, you see it in everything that you do,
Right.
which is a good thing. So moving on from there, you did decide to make a comeback, and it was one of those things that I was already involved. It's probably like I'm thinking 2011.
Yeah.
You came back, and I think you won the Sunkiss, and I was already in jiu-jitsu by then. I was already I already had my school. I was already sort of paying attention to the wrestling world because it helped me as a coach, in jiu-jitsu and MMA. What was going through your mind when you decided to give it another go?
I'd finally reached the point where I kind of had clarity. Like if I look back and I struggled. I had a path, laid out for me. When I got married and when I was done wrestling, but a big part of that was winning a gold medal in 2000. And so when I didn't do that, I had this foot in retirement, and then I had this foot I was going to go in this other direction. And so if I should have made a comeback. I should have done it in 2002 and 3 and 4 when I was younger and could have been better equipped to train the way I had trained for years. But I kind of felt like I always had this monkey on my back, and I made a comeback in 2008 and didn't do so well. And the format was the same. I kind of just did some training in my basement on an Atom machine I had and did takedowns and just didn't do well. And then in 2011. My mind was pretty clear, and I said, I just entered it in a manner of, let me see what I can do. Just let me see what I'm capable of, at this age and without, any training, see how far I can get, and I wound up putting myself in a good position and getting into the finals of the U.S. Open. And then I didn't go to the trials that summer because I hurt my neck right before that. And then 2012 was the Olympic trials. And, man, I always tell people, like, this is the difference in age. Because I had an awesome warm-up. I had a warm-up where, there wasn't one thing that my opponent could do to me. I could see it coming. I could feel it coming. I was in that zone. But in 15 minutes, your body can change and cool down when you start getting into your late 30s. So had I been able to step out on the mat, I would have been well. But then I wound up losing my first match. And during that match, that's when it finally was out of me. I remember wrestling and saying, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. It's no longer fun, and I don't have the desire, and not being an Olympic gold medalist doesn't bother me anymore. In regard to it's over, it's past. I've moved on, and that's when I was able to finally kind of let it go.
Right. So most people that happens around 13. For you, it happens a little later.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So. All right, so you've been wrestling since you're 5. You've had all this success. You've been through, I don't know even how many matches. But what is if you have any, like, give me an anecdote that maybe somebody doesn't know about, but maybe that you use to show the value of how you did the things you do, or some of the lessons you've learned. Any stories that you'd like to share?
I mean, I have tons of stories, but I don't know which one's valuable. But
just give me something that I could say. He told me this, nobody else, Cary.
Well, I tell my wife this one, and only people who really know me know this. When I look back, I'm 42, and if you ask me, hey, why are you so good when I was in my 20s? You'd have got an answer, and at 25, you'd have got a different answer. Now I'm older, I'm married, I have kids, I'm coaching a team, and I guess I'm wiser now at 42. When I look back, I say this was it. I could work out in the morning. I could go to class. I could go to the team practice in the afternoon. I could come home. I could eat. I could study. And it could be 9:30 at night, and I could sit on the couch, and I've already got 2 workouts in, and I'm watching my favorite TV show, and I could sit there and be okay with it. But I would sit there and say, shit. I'd look at it and say, man, I got to get this 3rd workout in by at least I got to get it started by 10 p.m.
Right.
And other people couldn't do that, and I did that my entire life, and I don't even know why I did it, Justin. I don't know why I got that way. I know why. I knew where I was going, but I don't know why I was able to do it. And so I look at it. I always say, like, when I hear it, this bothers me. This guy's got God-given talent. I've always said that's a weak person's mind. You know,
Right.
they're finding reasons why this guy wins and this guy doesn't, and they want to use, bring God into the equation. And I'm like, I don't sit back thinking God picks who's going to be a great wrestler and who's not. You know, who's going to be great at jiu-jitsu and who's not. I mean, I think He gives us all something, and maybe that's what I got. Maybe I got that drive, but I didn't have leverage. You know, I'm 5'4", so I had to wrestle a certain way. So this guy got leverage from, God. I got drive from God. I don't know. But I look back and I say, that was it. That was it. That's why I was able to succeed. And I never pictured I was going to lose. Like you're interviewing me because you think I have all this success, and you know what the U.S. Open is, right?
Yes.
All right. So that's the best. That's the biggest tournament in the United States with the best collegiate and open guys. And I'm being interviewed by you right now because I've got this success. But I went to the U.S. Open 13 times and won it 3 times. And a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
I've lost in that tournament more than I ever won.
Right.
And I just never stopped. And then I always knew I was going to make the world team. I always knew I was going to be a world champion. Always knew I was going to be an Olympic champion. Now, all that stuff didn't happen, but you couldn't convince me that it wasn't going to happen with what I was doing. But
Right.
when I look at my career, I've got more losses than I have in wins. But I just never freaking quit until I got to the top,
Right. Right. I remember watching a video that I don't know if it was a video interview or something, probably that you had done, and you spoke about after winning I think it was after one of your national championships. Somebody had commented that you didn't seem very excited, and you commented that it really wasn't a big deal to you, and that your goals were so much loftier than that. And
Right.
and do you remember doing that interview?
I mean, I don't remember the exact interview you're talking, but I've told people that before. People were always like, and some people get upset that I wasn't excited. I'm like, look, I mean, what's a big deal to you is not a big deal to me. I mean, I'm going, for bigger and better things. And I'm not putting down winning an NCAA title at all. It just wasn't on my radar as one of the big things that I needed to get done.
Right, right. And it's funny. I've always contended that everybody, they have a sort of natural passion for certain things, and it's only those things that you're ever going to be able to develop the drive to do at those highest levels.
Right.
And too many times people don't respect, who they are and what they're about. The fact that you found that in wrestling so early on and it worked is, I think, more of a testament to that. Now, for the individuals who are coming up in wrestling now that are looking to get ahead, that are looking to get to that next level, is it fair to tell them then that, I mean, just to be honest, if you're not willing to work at that level, you're probably never going to see the success that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say the biggest thing is people don't understand the peaks and valleys. Like, you don't just go to Mount Everest, like they acclimate. They go up, they come down. They go up, they come down. They keep doing it. They don't just say, okay, start walking till we get to the top. And,
Right.
When you're looking at your career, especially if you sit there and say, if I'm starting at 8 and I want to go to the Olympic Games, if we're using that as a guide here, okay, so we're talking 20 years of wrestling, time off. Like, people don't understand the benefit of time off, and they think I wrestled. I didn't wrestle year-round. I never went to junior nationals, which is a big thing for high school in our culture of our sport. And I didn't
Right.
go, and people ask me why. I say, you know why? Because it was 3 weeks to 4 weeks of my summer of training. Then I'm going into the middle of, I was at Northern Iowa at the time, and really a town that offered nothing. And I'm like, it eats a month of my summer every year. And I'm like,
Right.
I want to hang out with my friends a little bit. I want to do this. And I was always training. I was always going and getting on the mat and learning 2 to 3 days a week. But I didn't get sucked in to all these people saying, well, you're not the best if you don't win the junior national title. Well, I was sitting there saying, as far as I'm concerned, the best is the guy who's got the Olympic gold medal. So you can keep your
Right.
junior national titles. I'm looking further ahead down the road. And I didn't burn out. And that's the majority of why kids don't make it. They start at 8, and they're wrestling all year long. And it didn't exist when I wrestled. We didn't have this much wrestling. Now it's crazy, and
Right.
it's a moneymaker for these guys who host these events,
Sure.
and especially,
Absolutely.
with jiu-jitsu now and the rise of the UFC and in MMA, like, I'm sure in your culture and your sport's the same. Like, these tournaments are everywhere because everybody wants to cash in on entry fee.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. One of the obstacles we have now is amateur MMA, And in amateur MMA, so many people, I see it as what it should be in the grand scheme of things. The amateur being not professional, being a stepping stone to develop, expertise and, experience and, and whatnot. But the promoters, the majority of them see it as a fight card where they don't have to pay the fighters.
Yeah, right.
And that's just the value of it. So I totally get it. I understand. And, the big picture is important.
Yep.
I'm going to just change gears just a little bit and get your input on something else. Strength and conditioning. Nowadays, everybody's lifting weights. Because of the success of CrossFit, people are respecting barbell workouts and doing certain things. And I know, in my experience with grappling in general, both wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I've seen two camps. I've seen the bodyweight drill, pull up, push up camp, and I've seen the got to get in the weight room, lift weights, become really strong camp. Where do you guide? What did you do, and where do you guide your wrestlers?
My dad started me lifting early, but I'm not for it. I'm a body weight guy all the way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like one of the tests I do with my guys is 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, 2 minutes of squats, and a 1.5 mile run. I'm like, plain and simple. That's the best test for wrestling or our sport there is. It just burns you out, and it's pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and I'm sorry, I forgot the pull-ups in there, and 1.5 miles. So I'm a body weight guy with supplemental of weightlifting, and that would be explosive Olympic lifts, hang cleans,
right.
Clean and jerk, and a snatch if your technique is right. But
right.
Everything else is body weight. And then I'm a big proponent of swimming. Everybody likes to go run. Everybody wants to go run and beat up their body. And swimming increases your cardiovascular. It's like training at high altitude. It increases all the muscle, the strength in your entire body at one time. It's exhausting, and that's why people don't want to do it, because in 5 minutes of swimming laps, you're exhausted if you're not used to it.
Right.
So that's
right.
where I'm at. And then the last, which I didn't get into until I was older, we talk about it all the time. We constantly talk about it as coaches, but we don't really emphasize it, and that's stretching. And I'm big at, basically mastering, 20 to 27 key yoga poses and, having them down. And it keeps your body safe. It keeps it pushes out toxins and allows you to relax at the end of the day as well.
That's interesting. Is that something you have your wrestlers do?
Yeah, we do. Depending on where we're at when we're competing, we'll do one, at least one day a week where we'll come in and we'll do a light drill because they got, wrestlers are always having to lose weight. So we'll do this light, low-impact drill where maybe we're shooting double legs but not finishing them and driving the guy all the way to the mat. And we'll do a couple rounds of that real quick for a minute and a half, and then we'll go into a couple yoga poses. Then back into another drill position, then back into yoga poses. And we'll do it. And my guys will drop 6-7 pounds in an hour, an hour and a half of doing that.
Right. Well, it's funny. It's the first time I've ever heard that. I can only imagine that some of your wrestlers are like, we're going to do yoga?
Yeah, it is. And the first time, it's brutal. Hot yoga is brutal. And I would always hold it for years, and I finally did it. And it is brutal when you're not flexible, And I always considered myself flexible, but yoga puts you in places that you're twisted in 4 different directions at once.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very valuable stuff. I know most wrestlers, and certainly you qualify for this. You watch, your matches, and it's like your knees are made out of fucking rubber or something.
Right.
And it's funny that you do get a value out of the yoga poses. I would have guessed otherwise, but that's awesome insight. One of the things that you touched on just now, and sad, it was on a list of things that I wanted to talk about. What's your take on cutting weight? And, I have to say preemptively, I am the guy who, I think there's always going to be weight cutting. I think that, there are going to be certain, kids that do it wrong. They do it to the extreme. They don't have the proper guidance. But I think the notion that we're going to make weight cutting, that we're going to remove weight cutting from sports, I see it obviously much more in MMA that I'm speaking on, but you have more intimate experience with this as a whole than I do. So what's your take on what the world of weight cutting should be, shouldn't be, and what changes we should make, or if we should just leave it alone?
Well, below high school, absolutely there should be none as far as I'm concerned. Now, this is what I consider weight cutting. Actively trying to lose weight, actively missing meals and let's say we're talking about a kid who's not in high school, actively missing meals, and then you're going and running to make the weight class you want to compete in, that is weight cutting, go up. You know, you're too young to be doing that stuff. Now, high school, I always say, look, if we weigh in Saturday morning and compete on Saturday morning, can I eat breakfast on Friday? Can I eat a small lunch on Friday? And then I got to go to practice, and I probably can't eat dinner. And after practice, I got to do something for 30, 40 minutes, and then I make weight. That's I consider that safe and not a problem. You know what I mean? Now, if you're not eating for 2 or 3 days, you got problems. You go up to the next weight class, or determine, am I just being soft-minded and I'm eating bowls of ice cream on Sunday after a Saturday's match, and I'm getting 20 pounds over, which a lot of it, that's what it is. That's where I'm at, on weight cutting. Missing 1 to 2 meals and having to do one workout, but you're completely hydrated, that's safe. You start going past that, then I think you got to talk about going up. And, and you're right, I don't see it leaving the culture of our sport. It doesn't matter. I see guys now, dads now, the kid's 9, 10 years old, and they're talking about the Tulsa National Championships, wanting to drop 2 weight classes to win a title that a kid's going to get when he's 10 years old that a college coach could care less about.
Right. Right. And again, you see, that's just the parents trying to live through their fucking 10-year-old.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Yep.
It's disgusting. But, when it comes to weight cutting, like in MMA, there's this big push now to, we're going to test you a month out, we're going to test you 2 weeks out. And to me, it's all a bunch of bullshit. It's, if you're talking about, especially in MMA, we're talking about professionals who are getting paid, large sums of money to fight. To think that we're going to make their experience as safe as possible so they can go in and beat the shit out of each other. It's just, it makes no sense to me logically.
Well, you said something that's key there. They're grown men. Hey, if you want to go cut 50 pounds, go cut 50 pounds then. You know what I mean? You want to go do drugs, go do drugs. I'm not coming to your house and stopping you. I mean, these are grown men. If that's what they want to do. The only thing I think we test for is anabolic steroids and some other things. But that guy thinks he can compete and cut weight. Let him go do it. That's as far as I can say. That's a different age group. He's a grown man. Stay out of his business.
Right. Absolutely. Great point. And now in the world of wrestling, is there something, because I know a lot of sports, jiu-jitsu certainly, MMA certainly, and I'd imagine wrestling, and I know you've come up on a shit end of the stick with this concerned a couple of times. How much does politics play in the world of wrestling?
How much does politics play in everything in the world? I mean, for the most part, you want that job in the office. Are you have you had enough lunches with the boss compared to your coworker? I mean, and it's funny. My wife and I, we just had this talk last night. I mean, that is something it's like having a tattoo, and for me, like it comes up probably once a month, in my house as a teaching moment, and I was teaching one of my kids. But when I look back, I say, yeah, did I get screwed over and I get a roll into the deal? Absolutely. I'm not happy. It wasn't 100% fair. But at the same time, was it still in my control? Could I have scored more points? Absolutely. And with your mindset of sitting there saying it, with your tribe and Tom and all you guys, I'm sure you guys have the same mindset. Everything is within your control. That's how you have to approach it. And so yeah, is it not above board? Absolutely, but show me things that are. Show me anything that really is 100% above board. Where that's life, and that's what I tell my kids. Like, wake up in the morning, my own kids and my athletes. Wake up in the morning. Here's my plan for the day. Okay, look at it, and then say, okay, only 70% of it's going to work out, because 30% is going to get screwed over somehow, and that you anticipate those mistakes or anticipate. You get in a flat tire, and that's the way it goes.
Right. Absolutely. And what would you, if you could change something about the world of college wrestling, and in anything, what do you think that would be? What are one of the things that maybe, as a coach, maybe first as a competitor, now as a coach, you'd say, hey, if they only did this instead of that, it'd probably be better for everybody. Is there anything that you put there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to ask me first if I could change one match. I would change my mindset of the Olympic Games. I could have won the protested, the match that was re-wrestled. People always ask me, and if I'd have got my head straight,
I was trying not to bring that up.
Oh
But
no, I mean, it's part of it, man. I mean, like I just did a thing for Flow the other day, and that's what I said. That's my biggest regret. That's what my dad always prepared me for. He always said, hey, you could be sick in the Olympic finals. So when I got sick in my house, my dad said, okay, let's go do 4 workouts today then. You know what I mean? Like to get through it, to learn how to, because it's like wrestling injured. I tell my guys, how do you learn how to wrestle injured? Well, you got to wrestle injured. You got to come to practice injured and do it and know that you're capable of it. And so that would be, for me personally, I would change that and get my head out of my ass and fix that. College wrestling, I would get rid of. I would go to international wrestling. That was what I loved. I always wanted to be the best in the world, not just the best in the country. And I don't like the fact that we have this separate style. Like, I mean, we should be wrestling what everybody else in the world is wrestling, and that's, freestyle and Greco and becoming the best in the world at it. And if we did that, there's no doubt in my mind that we could catch the Russians and possibly become the premier, wrestling country in the world.
Right. And it's funny. I've always wondered, like why isn't that a thing? What prevents us? Is it just tradition? Is it just guys keeping their minds closed? What is it that is preventing us from going to regular freestyle?
Yeah, I don't know. I literally just think it's a tradition. I think the day we finally say, hey, let's move on from it, maybe we have all these old timers and we break their hearts. I don't know what it is, but I don't know why. I mean, as coaches, we have a convention every year and we talk about it. And the majority of the guys are like, yeah, let's do it. But it's like nobody's got the balls to make the move and do it. I mean, we do, and we talk about it all the time. So, but I do think we've made some transitions in the rules from last year to this year, and they're getting more brave on those changes. And I do think we're on the cusp of actually making some changes, especially with being tossed out of the Olympic Games for 2020 when we had to fight to get our way back in. I think that's got people, perking up and now, paying attention and looking to make that change.
Right. And now let me ask you the obstacles that wrestling in general has been facing. You bring up the Olympic hiccups that we've been having. Why are the Olympics trying to get rid of wrestling? Are they getting rid of wrestling? Is it all bullshit? Is it smoke and mirrors? What's going on with the Olympics and wrestling? Why are they trying to get rid of it?
Here's what I was out of that scene for a while, and this is what I heard. Well, basically our governing body was so corrupt, which was FILA. It was so corrupt. There was a bunch of good old boys that have been doing it for a long time, and there was a way for them to, benefit and prosper off of being in charge of the northern hemisphere of FILA and the European hemisphere, and so these guys were prospering from it. So the IOC said the easiest way to clean this up is to kick them out. Right. And so when they kicked them out, the wrestling communities who had always, paid homage to these guys and invited them over to their country and given them gifts, finally said, okay, get the hell out of here, and we put a new body in place. Now, it's still not totally 100%, where it should be. We've got some of the same old guys still there. They just changed their name, and but it's better than what it was, that's for sure. Right.
That's awesome. All right, well, holy shit, we ran through my list, Cary, pretty quickly. That's awesome. Well, if somebody's looking to find your information, obviously your site is still active, still up there, and still awesome, which is Kolat.com.
Yep.
KOLAT.com, and it's I've always wondered, looking at your site and going, the site's it's so good, it's so successful too, because I see it growing in content and just the quality of the stuff. It's like it's a good name. You don't have like one of these long Eastern Bloc names because it'd be impossible to remember. Yeah. And I'm wondering if that played a role in it. But either way, Kolat.com. Man, I gotta say, man, just thanks for cutting some time out for me and the listeners here. I appreciate it. And is there any last words to the listeners of the Pressure Project?
No, man, I just I appreciate you guys having me on. I mean, everything I always do, and it necessarily most of the time involves wrestling, so it's good to do something outside because, it's important that you're constantly growing, and to think that you can only grow by being stuck in your box or in your world is complete ignorance. You get something from other people. It's like, I told you I got to go to dinner with Tom, and that was brief for like an hour, and it was just a couple things that were said that stick with me. And so you can always grab something, some kind of knowledge from somebody, outside of your world. So it's important.
Right. And Yeah, we do have some mutual friends in common, and those they're very very quality people, and it's really no surprise to me that somebody of your level would be connected to them and vice versa.
Yeah.
So thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I will talk to you again soon, brother.
All right. Take care, Justin. I appreciate it, my man.
And like I said, Cary was an open book, willing to talk about anything and everything I brought up and more, it turned out, right? So I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Cary for taking time out of his super busy schedule to talk to us here at the Pressure Project. We appreciate it, and who knows, maybe we'll have him back on again. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode. So as always, brothers, pressure to power.